And we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to yet another performance roundtable of the code review group. Today, it seems like we're going to have a front end only roundtable. That's totally fine. So starting off, I'm going to start reviewing the board. So last week we had a chat, a suggestion of using an issue board to track the topics that are being discussed. So this is what it looks like at the moment. So sharing the screen. So it should be, can you see my screen? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. So these are the topics that we have right away. So these two are ready for development. And the first one, create technical documentation describing the several components. That's already being scheduled as a deliverable. Carrie's already assigned. Phil has already started working on this, so I'm tempted to assign to him in 15.7 as well. We're going to finalize the plan later today, so that's why we still don't have a face there. But that's what I'm thinking about doing. Then there's the track duration of specific parts of diffs request, which is backend only, so I don't think we can. Okay, so for some reason this didn't make the cut. So that's totally fine. Hopefully we'll pick it up soon. So we'll go through the discussions topics, which is these ones, the ones that need refinement. The first one is improve cache of the diff files batch API. That's a total backend topic, so we're going to skip that for now, as we do with this one as well. So investigate the possibility of paginating diff metadata. That's mostly backend restrictions, so we'll skip that too. Whenever possible, under the MR diffs from a client-side cache, unless MRID is outdated. So I wanted to see if you have any opinion on this. So we had a discussion. I had a question to the security mentioned. Yeah. So this is one of the things that we talked about, the security perspective of caching things on the client. Word on the street is that we wouldn't worry too much because it's still just caching data, and we're going to have some caching validation procedure. So even if they do have access to it after a couple of days of losing access, it won't be for very long. So I don't think that will be much. I thought it was an issue, but all the discussions that I've heard have downplayed that part. So I think we're totally fine there. And this is with a question that came up for me. I think I shared it, just before the other call. Comparing head now, since we're comparing with head now, the head is always moving. So we will be able to distinguish from comparisons with head that don't cause any differences in the diff, if that makes sense. And then you say, I think we can answer. Okay, I think we can have an answer for this if we can have the metrics that can give us how much users and how often is the MR changes. So in theory, we can track requests. We need to log in diff in data. Not sure how this could look code. If we can't include an existing log entry, we can just have a new log entry that we can filter.
I have a question. Does this put focus on the backend caching? Because I'm not sure, like render diffs from client-side cache. I'm not sure what that means in our current state.
Right. So
like what exactly we want to cache?
Yeah. So in this essence, we'll be caching the data that we're getting from the batch diffs. So in essence, and I'm guessing diffs metadata too. So in essence, what we're theorizing is that we can keep a copy of those responses in client side, and this could be IndexedDB, so that we can easily. So the reason why we're considering IndexedDB is because we need to be able to quickly check how many MR copies do we have older than 7 days, for example, and destroy them. That's one of them for cache invalidation, and the other is just to be able to specifically grab certain parts of the data. If we want to keep it in local storage, we're going to have to, parse the JSON that is kept in local storage, read it, check it. All right, no, this one is fine. Next one. So it's going to be much more morose and long, lengthy process. So that's why we're considering IndexedDB to kind of like put it in a way that we could query it.
I think this is already implemented because we have HTTP caching, which is
Correct.
basically the same thing.
It's true.
I'm not sure if we ever want to introduce any more front-end logic to this caching, because this is technical debt basically to us. So if we can stay with HTTP caching, we should better do this, because the browser will do also invalidation stuff for us if the backend sends correct headers.
That's a good point.
I wonder what was the motivation for introducing any front-end logic here.
Yeah, so the motivation was mostly just making it much faster to render. Now, you do bring a good point. Is there any advantage? Okay, I just called my Siri. Yeah. Trying to think if there's any benefit if we call by calling the files, by calling the endpoints, we're getting warm caches and it just immediately responds. I haven't seen that working, so that's a funny little experiment to see.
I cannot verify that it works locally, but Patrick said it should be working in production. So
yeah, it is.
Let's try it out.
The e-tags should be working here.
Doesn't seem like so.
Well, 304.
But that's metadata. I think the heaviest part are div page.
Yeah, the head,
which is not cached.
Let me just check if I have the disabled cache. No. There we go.
So yeah, it's also cached.
Now I have the 304.
And it still took us about 500 milliseconds, which is quite a lot.
Yeah. So the question is whether doing it locally would be faster than this.
I think maybe we should investigate a little bit why we still send cached responses. Like why it takes so long for us still.
Let me write that down. Raised a good point. If we have CP caching already, would the complexity responses indexed DB be worth it? Quickly checked broad and requests responses still took around
I'm not sure that HTTP caching is really working, even though we are getting like 304 code. We're still waiting like for 500 milliseconds, which basically takes the same amount as to get the fresh request without any caching. So it doesn't seem like it's doing anything, at least now. Because if it was cached, we should see no response time. It should be just written as like in memory cache or like local cache, whatever.
Right. Try to find a large MR with a lot of files. Oh, I think I can respect something. Oh crap. We had a merge request. Merge request. That was really large. Yeah, no, this is not going to work. I don't think this triggers more than one batch diff. Let's call it that. Oh, 2. Okay. So 200. 4.
Yeah, it's 304, but we are still waiting 500 milliseconds.
Mm-hmm.
It has a must revalidate header. Cache control must revalidate. I wonder if that's causing like for it to wait for the backend to respond. I'm not sure. I think we should investigate this because that it doesn't seem like it's
Just ping Patrick.
it's being really
It's
impactful.
expected. Delay. No, I said approvable. I know. Right. Is that fair? Should we keep it there and move on?
Yep. Yep.
Right. Thanks for that. And that brings us to virtual scroller that I have somewhere here. There we go. Right. Virtual scroller. We talked a little bit about static content being rendered client side, that it has never changed. So we're looking into rendering in a worker, and then I asked, do we actually use the diff in every contents? I don't think so. And then he said suggestions. Then he said that we can use the content in the DOM for that. And then we also said that this topic is being investigated in an issue, which is a deliverable for 15.6. That's on you. So do you want to share something, Stanislav, about this at all?
Yeah, I had some progress exploring this. So basically, I have a working demo which is rendering diffs up using UV3 compat mode.
Oh.
And also a working demo of rendering our diffs only in web worker. I'll try to show you how it works right now. Basically, it's just diffs. It's not any other stuff. It's not discussions, extending lines or whatever.
Sure.
Basically, no interactivity, but it's working already in a very primitive form. So let me share the screen. Okay, so
yeah, I can see
this is the page I'm usually testing on because it has lots of files. So let's try reload it and see what we get. Yeah, right now it usually takes some time because it has lots of errors in the console, and Chrome takes forever in that case to refresh the page. And also a lot of data is stored in the web worker, which I'm not clearing right now, but it works at least.
Yeah.
So this is rendering as we're used to. It's streaming. It's also not very fast because of the APIs, which we have to also improve. But at least you see it's slowly getting there. Since this is like the first prototype, it's not very fast as expected.
Sure.
But you can already see like how it works. I can hold
I see.
button to scroll to the end.
That's basically showing that it's getting dumped on the DOM as soon as it gets the data.
Yeah. It is getting slow at some point. I have to investigate why. So as you see, it's not outputting like the whole file at once. It's just rendering line by line. I
Can
guess
you
there's
show me the
some
memory?
slowdown.
Can you show me the memory profiler while we're doing this?
Yeah, let's try. Let's see
Memory, yeah.
how memory footprint.
There we go. JS heap size, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's quite
right.
large right now. One of the reasons is I've not removed a lot of stuff that we
Right.
have.
Yeah.
So it's expected that the JS heap size is large.
Mm-hmm. A million DOM nodes. Whew.
Yeah.
It's quite the MR.
Actually, it looks like a lot, like
Mhm.
million DOM nodes, but once it's loaded, I'm impressed how fast it is. So it doesn't take a lot of time to scroll through the
Right.
list of the
Right.
divs. It's basically instant. So once we
Yeah.
render, it's completely, it is really fast. And also, as you can see, the memory is not growing, so it's constantly fixed at that position, which is a good thing.
Right.
It might be also related to the stuff from the previous run, so it might not be just cleared.
How are we getting the data? Are we still getting the data through the batch diffs?
Yeah, I'm still using patch diffs requests.
Okay.
They are not shown here for some reason.
Yeah, the browser is kind of like
As you can see, there are some bugs because it
yeah,
tries to
requesting for
request
undefined.
some undefined stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are quite some bugs, but
Sure.
nevertheless,
No,
it's
it's
working.
still work in progress, so for sure. But thanks for showing me this. Yeah, I think it's just worth keep on experimenting there and just see if we can iron out some of the kinks. What's the plan there? What's next?
The plan is to try to render discussions, which are the core element of the
Right.
divs.
Yeah.
That might be troublesome. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Also, I would like to test at least putting all the interactivity into the divs. So expanding div lines, working, changing list view from side by side and inline,
Right.
navigation in the sidebar, all this stuff. I would like to make at least partially working to see
Mhm.
the complexity that we have to introduce, if it's even complex or not. Also, I would like to measure when it's working against our current virtual scoring solution and
Right.
just basically rendering it on client side. There's also one thing. I would like to make it a little bit faster. I think
Yeah.
right now it's very slow because it should be much faster since it's not blocking my main thread and using just worker
So this
to
is
do
using
this
your
stuff.
machine, right? This is in a local dev environment.
Yes, this is just rendered locally.
I'm curious to see how this would behave with the caching, with the HTTP caching, because if the requests are coming immediately or almost immediately, how would the streaming
I'm,
look in a second time?
I was wondering the same thing, and I was wondering if we can cache the result of the render, because right now, if we decouple static and dynamic stuff, we can just cache all the rendered stuff and reuse it using inner HTML. So basically print it on the page
Sure.
as is. Of course, it will take a little bit longer, but at least it's all cached.
That's an interesting
And
thing,
then,
because if we're not caching the request responses, we could cache the rendering.
yeah, we can cache the rendering, and it's basically very efficient because we don't have any network round trips, and and we can add all our front-end logic on top of it, which we cannot do with like classic client-side rendering because it still has to be hydrated,
Yeah,
and all of that stuff. So I plan to investigate like decoupling static and dynamic content to see how it works.
sure.
Does it make sense? I also found a lot of caveats regarding this approach. For example, we cannot use style tag in SFCs, in VSFCs if you want to render this, at least now, because it tries to inject styles into head, which we don't have in worker. It basically crashes.
Right.
And there are many more other stuff that I can list forever. But one thing I've noticed that it is still limited by the way we start our apps. So we still have to wait for the whole page to load, for the bundle to load, before we can do any rendering. That is part of the reason I think we should look a little bit more into server-side rendering of the stuff.
Okay.
I suppose it was used to be server-side rendered and it moved to client-side. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Yes.
So if we had this client server-side rendered, we can actually combine these approaches. So we can fetch the server-side rendered stuff, and
So
we basically don't have.
when you say server-side rendered, what part would you want to have it server-side rendered?
Mostly div stuff, like all the lines. Basically, the stuff that doesn't change at all. So if we can get the stuff server-side rendered and fetch it from the server, and especially if it's cached already,
Yeah.
that would be much faster than the worker solution, because the worker has to spin up. It also has a completely different bundle, which also takes time to parse, to compile.
Right.
So if we can skip this part as well and just use server-side rendering from Rails, that would be a lot faster, I think,
So
especially for the first paint.
if it's just the diffs, the diff lines, I mean, we always try to not repeat ourselves, right? But I wonder if we could get a prototype built with Rails template, with Haml template. We can just code what we have and use Haml to generate those server-side rendered for now. So the downside of that is that we won't be able to update it in one place and then have it be reflected everywhere. But if we can just use that for the diffs content and generate that on the back end, now we still need to batch it for the front end. The reason why we moved away from the server-side rendering in the past was exactly the page was taking 30 seconds, a minute to render, to even render the first byte, because everything was being computed in the backend. So if we could give it a test of like how would it look like in a way that we can still work with it in the front end, could be interesting to give it a try.
We don't necessarily like need to batch it. We need to do just one request. So basically, the rendering stuff could be split into two parts. The one part is rendering like first 5 files on server, which shouldn't take a lot, and the user immediately gets rendered divs without any spinners, without any additional loading of client-side code.
Okay.
So he can see like the first 5 files, but after that we request like not after that, but as soon as we render the page, start rendering the page, we request the server-side rendering of the rest of the files and start streaming it right after the page is loaded.
Right. So basically the first 5 files would come with the page. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Come with the page. kick off the requests. So, and the requests would be not for the JSON, but for the server-side rendered as well.
I have to look into what we're exactly having in the JSON, because it's not just lines, like highlighted lines. It's
No.
also like code coverage.
Yeah.
And lots of other stuff. So I guess we'll still have to request this stuff. But
Yeah.
the good thing is that now we can decouple this. So the
Sure.
lines themselves decoupled from the metadata they have, like from the code coverage discussions. At least we can see all the code and render all the stuff on top of this. But we already can start interacting with the div, like reviewing the code.
Got it. All right. It would be interesting to see how that could work. So I'm writing a comment here so that we can. So I missed some. I missed some of your next steps. And I added some caveats there. We need to make it faster. Test it with HTTP caching. What if we could cache the output of the rendered worker in the client? And some caveats. Feel free to write them down. Yes. And then server-side rendered backend. So another possibility. No.
Not yet
It
completed.
would be much, yeah, it would be much faster than any worker due to bootstrapping, due to bundle parsing, strapping, and taken. Especially if cached on the backend.
One thing I would add here is that we already have a server-side rendered diffs. But I think they're very basic, because
Yeah,
I recently saw like Haml templates that reuse all these like lines that try to render them. I'm not sure where it's used, but it's there.
probably in this template. No, so these are the old diffs basically. It's how we used to render things in the back in the merge request. So that's probably what we're still using. That's probably what's still in the templates.
If that stuff is not that much different from what we are using right
It
now,
is different. So this is still
different.
table.
Okay.
We're not using tables anymore in the merge requests.
No,
So,
that's not quite the problem. We can rewrite it to
exactly.
anything.
Yeah, so we might want to catch that and update the markup and stuff, but it shouldn't be too different. I think once we get to the line, that's just the highlighted line that we get from, I don't know, Rouge or something. So yeah, could be interesting to test that out. So should we call it there? Share it here. What was the next steps? Can you just help me fill this in? It was rendering discussions, testing inline and parallel. There was something else in there. Next steps.
Basically adds more interactivity and benchmark it against virtual scrolling and client-side rendering.
Okay.
And also this stuff you just shown me with backend rendering, I think I will try to test this one as well.
Server-side rendered. See below. So there we go. I'll link into that. I think it's a good update.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on this topic?
No, I think we've covered it.
Cool. And then the other one was the suppressing file diff to reduce overall payload. Do we have any more thoughts here?
I think it's related a little bit to what we've just discussed. If we can send rendered diffs as HTML and not in our page file JSON API,
yeah,
So basically, we can cut all the highlighted lines, which technically should or could speed up the API a little bit because we don't have to render this anymore on client.
Yeah, I think this is a no-brainer in terms of like gains, right? If we have merge requests with these files that are not necessary, great, we can suppress them. But I think this is mostly like backend because the backend needs to detect them and they need to not send them in the payload or whatever, and then offer a way to reload, which we already have, I think, with a given path. So yeah, and there's not much here for me to think about. It's more like backend wise, is this feasible? Oh, this is other things. Yeah.
I think the question is, if we cut anything from the API, does it really improve the performance of that API? Because it seems like it's not the amount of data we send, it's the amount of calls we do. And I don't think we can avoid calls to like fetching the diff itself from the API. It doesn't remove that call.
Right.
So even if we cut the data, I'm not sure if it can actually improve the performance of the API, but we have to ask for backend here.
Yeah, of the responses would improve significantly because it doesn't seem like the problem. Let me just share the screen so you see what I'm writing to see if I'm reflecting what you said well. It seemed like we're being slow on the transmission, but we are being slow in the queries we do.
Yeah.
Suppressing would remove them. The response will remove the hefty payload of diff lines from the response. The backend code still has to fetch them to see. Well, yeah, but we wonder if the backend procedure would be simplified without be simplified and able to avoid loading the entire file. Dear. Question for our fellow backenders.
I also think if we measure that like rendering on server is actually a whole lot faster than virtual scrolling.
Yeah.
I think this is inevitably what we will do. We will just strip out the lines and we'll be left just with metadata for the diff files. So yeah, this is closer than it looks.
Okay. So I don't need to add there. Do you want to add that here?
I think we can link the efforts. So this is actually related to each other. Yeah.
Also, a relevant topic is the possibility of server-side rendering. Server-side rendering parts of the diff. See there. Okay. All right. I think it's good. So yeah, now the agenda is empty. We didn't say anything. So let me just write here, we revised. So I know what I'll do. So I'll just copy this. We discussed that. We discussed that. And we discussed that. Topics discussed. Comments added in the issues. Please check. So that everybody who's watching the recording can take a look about the issues that we commented on. Do you have any? So that's the end of the issues that we have open. Is there anything else in your mind?
Not at the moment. I think we've covered everything.
Okay, this is useful. I think we're still able to cover good ground, even though we don't have any other back end or front end. But thanks for coming, Stanislav. Kind of our little performance focused one-on-one. Yeah, I appreciate it. Let's keep the ball rolling. I'll open a new issue for the next week, and I'm also going to check about the time. If we can make it in a way that we have more backend available to join the call. I think if it's a bit early, we could probably include David. So I'm going to see. Yeah, it's 7 already for him. So yeah, I'll get the ball rolling on that. Thank you so much, and I'll post this to YouTube, and I'll see you later on the call.
Yeah, thanks a lot. See you.
Thanks. Just put in the agenda if you thought that the call was worth it.
Yeah.
No pressure. If it wasn't worth it, you can say no pressure.
As always.
Thank you. You're too kind. All right. See you later, man. Talk.